Have you ever stopped to think that the Bible contains prophecies so accurate that they defy any logical explanation? Among all of them, there is one in particular that not only revealed the future of Earth's empires, but also shed light on the last days of humanity. This prophecy was given to a young man named Daniel, a man who lived in a time of great change and saw, with stunning clarity, events that still await their final fulfillment. If you want to understand more about the prophecies that shaped history and what is yet to come, subscribe to the channel. Here, we explore the scriptures in depth and reveal surprising truths that can change your view of the future. Don't miss the next videos. Daniel was not just a prophet. He was a young Jew who was taken captive to Babylon after his people were defeated and his temple destroyed. Imagine the impact of losing everything: your land, your culture, and your freedom. In the eyes of the world, he was just another prisoner in an empire that seemed invincible. But God had other plans. Babylon in Daniel's day was no ordinary city. It was the center of the world, full of riches, science, and idolatry. Babylonian kings ruled with an iron fist and believed they were chosen by the gods to dominate the nations. Within this scenario, Daniel stood out not for his strength, but for his wisdom and fidelity to God. Even though he was forced to live in a pagan culture, he remained steadfast in his faith, which placed him in positions of influence he would never have imagined. But Daniel didn't just interpret dreams or advise kings. He received direct visions from God, sealed messages that defied human understanding. Among them, one specific prophecy revealed the rise and fall of empires with frightening precision and pointed to the future of humanity in a way that resonates to this day. What makes this prophecy so extraordinary? First is the fact that it was not revealed to anyone, but to a pagan king who had no relationship with God. Nebuchadnezzar, the powerful monarch of Babylon, had a disturbing dream that no wise man in his kingdom could interpret. Only Daniel, with divine help, was able to uncover its meaning. This dream was not just a warning to that king, but a revelation that traced the entire timeline of world history, from Babylon to the end of time. Now, think for a moment about the magnitude of this. A vision given more than 2,500 years ago predicted historical events so accurately that historians to this day try to explain how it was possible. This dream revealed the emergence of powerful kingdoms that would come after Babylon, each with specific characteristics, and culminated in an event that has not yet happened: the establishment of an eternal kingdom that will never be destroyed. Daniel understood that he was facing something much bigger than himself. He realized that human history was not a set of random events, but rather a divine plan being revealed little by little. Over the years, he continued to receive visions, some so complex that even he had difficulty understanding them. However, one thing was certain: God was revealing not only what would happen in the following years, but also how humanity would move towards a definitive outcome. If this prophecy was correct in its predictions about the empires of the past, then what about the parts that have not yet been fulfilled? What does this mean for us today? Many people ignore biblical prophecies or treat them as symbolic, but the accuracy of the events predicted in the book of Daniel defies skepticism. He saw the rise of kings, the destruction of empires, and received details about future times that are closer than we imagine. As we delve into the prophecy that Daniel revealed to the world, we will understand why this book was sealed for so long and why, today, it has become more relevant than ever. Daniel was not just an isolated prophet in the midst of Babylonian exile. He was a man who lived through one of the most turbulent times in Israel's history, witnessing the collapse of his nation and the rise of an empire that seemed unshakable. To understand the depth of his visions and the relevance of his prophecies for today, we need to go back in time and delve into the historical and cultural context in which everything happened. Around the year 600 BC, Jerusalem fell to the Babylonian army under the command of King Nebuchadnezzar. This event was not just a military defeat, but a prophetic milestone. The prophets Jeremiah and Ezekiel had already warned that God would allow his own people to be taken captive because of their rebellion and idolatry. However, few heeded these warnings. Solomon's temple, the greatest expression of Israelite faith, was looted and destroyed, and the sacred objects were taken to the pagan temples of Babylon. Daniel was among the young nobles taken prisoner. But unlike most exiles, he was not put into hard labor or chained like a common slave. Nebuchadnezzar had a peculiar strategy. He chose the most intelligent and capable among the conquered people and trained them in Babylonian culture, transforming them into faithful servants of the empire. Daniel and his friends were inserted into this system, receiving new names and being taught science, astrology, and the traditions of the Chaldeans. Babylon was an impressive city, unlike anything Daniel had known in Jerusalem. Its walls were so wide that carriages could run along them side by side. The Hanging Gardens, considered one of the wonders of the ancient world, showed the luxury and wealth of the empire. But at the same time, it was a deeply pagan society, full of gods, idols, and rituals that went against everything Daniel had learned about the true God. Even in the face of cultural and religious pressure, Daniel and his companions remained faithful. At the beginning of their stay, they refused to contaminate themselves with court food, as they knew that much of the food was offered to idols before being served. This first test of loyalty demonstrated that they were not willing to compromise their faith, even if it cost them their lives. Daniel's loyalty to God made him different from others. His wisdom caught the king's attention, and he soon stood out among the wise men of Babylon. While astrologers and enchanters relied on mystical signs and formulas, Daniel received direct revelations from the creator of the universe. It was in this context that Nebuchadnezzar had a disturbing dream, a nightmare so intense that it made him wake up in a cold sweat. He knew that dream had a special meaning, but suspicious of his advisors, he demanded something impossible, that they tell him the content of the dream before interpreting it. None of the Babylonian magicians and wise men were able to respond, and the furious king ordered them all to be executed. Daniel, upon learning of the situation, asked the king for time and sought God in prayer. During the night, he received the same vision that Nebuchadnezzar had seen, and with it the revelation of its meaning. The next day he stood before the king and declared that it was not through human wisdom that he knew the dream, but because the God of heaven had revealed the future. Before a court full of idols and soothsayers, Daniel spoke words that would forever change the understanding of history. What he revealed was not just an answer to an anxious king, but a map of humanity's future, detailed with stunning precision. The prophecy that Daniel was about to unveil was much more than a simple vision. She charted the fate of the world's greatest empires, describing kingdoms that didn't even exist at the time. What God showed Daniel would be studied for generations and, even today, continues to intrigue scholars and religious leaders. Daniel's revelation would mark a turning point, not just for Babylon, but for all humanity. In front of Nebuchadnezzar and the entire Babylonian court, Daniel prepared to reveal one of the most impactful dreams ever recorded in history. The king, restless and impatient, stared at the young Hebrew in front of him. His own magicians and diviners had failed, unable to reveal or interpret the dream. But Daniel, supported by the God of heaven, knew exactly what to say. Calmly and steadily, Daniel began to describe the vision that disturbed Nebuchadnezzar during the night. In the dream, the king had seen an immense statue, grand and terrifying. His head was made of pure gold. His chest and arms were silver. The belly and thighs were made of bronze. His legs were of iron, and his feet were a mixture of iron and clay. As the king watched the statue, a stone was cut, but not by human hands. This stone hit the statue's feet and completely destroyed it. Then the stone grew and became a great mountain that filled the entire earth. Upon hearing the exact description of his dream, Nebuchadnezzar was amazed. He knew that no one except someone with divine power could have revealed that. But the most impressive thing was yet to come, the interpretation. Daniel explained that the statue represented the succession of kingdoms that would rule the earth, starting with Babylon itself. The golden head symbolized the Babylonian Empire, a kingdom of unparalleled glory and wealth. However, this empire would not last forever. After him, an inferior kingdom would emerge, represented by the silver chest and arms. This would be the Medo-Persian Empire, which would one day defeat Babylon and take its place. After the rule of the Medes and Persians, a third kingdom would come, symbolized by the bronze belly and thighs. This would be the Greek Empire, led by Alexander the Great, who would conquer vast regions with impressive speed. But this empire would not be eternal either. The fourth kingdom, represented by the iron legs, would emerge with overwhelming force. This would be the Roman Empire, known for its brutality and military power. The statue's feet, composed of iron and clay, represented a divided kingdom, strong in some parts but fragile in others. The mixture of these materials symbolized that this last stage of world history would be marked by fragile alliances, divided peoples, and internal conflicts. The prophecy, up to this point, was already surprising. But the most important detail was yet to come. The stone that came down from the sky and destroyed the entire statue represented the kingdom of God, an eternal domain that would never be destroyed. Unlike human kingdoms, which arise and disappear, the divine kingdom would replace them all and rule forever. Nebuchadnezzar was so impressed with the accuracy of the interpretation that he fell down before Daniel and declared that his God was the true God. That moment not only changed Daniel's life, but also set a precedent. God's prophecies do not fail. The most impressive thing is that this vision was fulfilled exactly as it was revealed. Centuries after Daniel's death, Babylon fell to the Medes and Persians. The Medo-Persian Empire was overcome by the Greeks, who in turn were defeated by the Romans. And what happened to Rome? Exactly as the prophecy indicated, the empire was not conquered by another single kingdom, but fragmented into several nations, some strong as iron and others fragile as clay. Given this historical precision, an inevitable question arises. If everything that has been predicted so far has come true, what about the last part of the prophecy? The stone that destroys the statue and establishes an eternal kingdom has not yet come. This means that we are living in the last stages of this prophecy, awaiting the time when the kingdom of God will finally be established on the earth. Nebuchadnezzar's vision, interpreted by Daniel, is not just an account of the past, but a map of the future. Each kingdom described has already had its time in history, and now only the last event remains to be fulfilled. This means that Daniel's prophecy is not over. It is ongoing, and we are part of it. The revelations that Daniel received did not stop with Nebuchadnezzar's dream. If the vision of the statue had already demonstrated that God was in control of history, other prophecies came to further deepen this divine plan. Years later, Daniel himself received extraordinary visions that expanded on what had been revealed in the Babylonian king's dream. This time, the images did not involve metal statues, but rather strange and terrifying creatures, symbolic representations of the kingdoms that would rule the world. In one of these visions, Daniel saw 4 large animals emerging from the sea, each different from the other. The first was a lion with eagle wings, imposing and majestic. As he watched, his wings were torn off, and he stood on his feet like a man, receiving a human heart. The second animal was a bear, which held 3 ribs in its mouth and leaned to one side. A voice said to him, "Get up and devour a lot of meat." The third animal was a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads, a symbol of agility and power. But the fourth animal was different from all the others. He was terrible, amazing, and extremely strong. It had iron teeth and destroyed everything around it. Furthermore, it had 10 horns, and among them appeared a small horn that grew, knocking down 3 of the others. This horn had eyes like a man and a mouth that spoke arrogantly. The sight deeply disturbed Daniel. He knew it was something extremely important, but he didn't fully understand its significance. However, an angel explained to him that those 4 animals represented 4 kingdoms that would emerge successively in the world. The description matched exactly what had already been revealed in the statue's dream. The lion symbolized Babylon, with its power and greatness, but which would lose its strength. The bear represented the Medo-Persian Empire, tilted to one side because Persia would end up dominating over the Medes. The leopard was the Greek Empire, fast and conquering, which after the death of Alexander the Great was divided between 4 generals, exactly like the 4 heads of the animal. And the last animal, terrible and destructive, was Rome, which would subjugate all nations with its brutality. But there was something else in the prophecy that caught our attention. The small horn that grew and dropped 3 other horns represented a power different from the others. He was not just a military government, but an arrogant figure who spoke against God and persecuted the saints of the Most High. This description raises many discussions among scholars and theologians, as it seems to point to a future government, a system that will rise in the last days to directly challenge divine authority. Daniel realized that this vision went beyond the political history of the kingdoms of earth. It extended until the time of the end, when God would intervene directly to judge the nations and establish his eternal kingdom. He saw a heavenly court, where the Ancient of Days sat on a throne of fire, surrounded by myriads of heavenly beings. Before this court, the 4th beast was destroyed, and dominion was given to one like the Son of Man, who came with the clouds of heaven and received a kingdom that would never end. These words sound familiar because Jesus, centuries later, would use exactly this expression to refer to himself, the Son of Man. When religious leaders questioned him about his identity, he cited this passage from Daniel, making it clear that he was the prophesied king, the one who would rule forever. Faced with these revelations, Daniel was distressed and disturbed. He knew God was in control, but the images he saw were intense and frightening. Persecutions, the emergence of powerful kingdoms, and the arrogance of the little horn indicated difficult times before the arrival of God's kingdom. This prophecy leads us to deep reflection. If everything that has been revealed to Daniel has happened accurately so far, what about the parts that still need to be fulfilled? The world is heading towards the outcome he saw in his vision, where human powers will rise with arrogance, but in the end they will be judged and destroyed by the true king. Daniel saw something we are still waiting for. He witnessed the future and recorded everything so that when the times came, those who sought the truth would know what was coming. Daniel's visions revealed not only the rise and fall of humanity's great empires, but also brought intriguing details about the end time. Among all the prophecies recorded in the book of Daniel, one of the most enigmatic and profound is the prophecy of the 70 weeks. This revelation not only accurately predicted the coming of the Messiah, but also shed light on future events that would culminate in the last days of human history. The vision of the 70 weeks was given to Daniel in a time of deep prayer and anguish. He was seeking God, asking for understanding about the future of his people and the fate of Jerusalem, which had been in ruins since the Babylonian conquest. It was then that the angel Gabriel appeared to him with a heavenly message. 70 weeks are determined upon your people and upon your holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to atone for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness. These words heralded a prophetic period that would forever change the history of humanity. The 70 weeks mentioned were not ordinary weeks, but rather weeks of years, a concept already known to Jews in the counting of Sabbath cycles. Thus, each week represented 7 years, totaling a period of 490 years. The angel continued explaining that, from the order to restore Jerusalem, the counting of this period would begin. In the first 69 cycles of 7 years, that is 483 years, the Anointed One, the Messiah, would be revealed. And, in fact, from King Artaxerxes' decree for the rebuilding of Jerusalem until Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem, this period was fulfilled exactly as prophesied. But something surprising happens after those 69 weeks. The angel declares that the Messiah will be killed and that the city and sanctuary will be destroyed again. This was fulfilled in the year 70 after Christ, when the Romans invaded Jerusalem and completely destroyed the temple. The city that had been rebuilt, according to prophecy, was once again razed to the ground, and the Jews were scattered among the nations. However, the prophecy spoke of 70 weeks, and until that moment, only 69 have been fulfilled. This means there is still one last week left, a period of 7 years that has yet to happen. This last prophetic period is directly linked to the time of the end and the emergence of a world leader who will sign a pact with many nations. The prophecy states that in the middle of this last week, this leader will break the covenant and establish the abomination of desolation in the temple. Jesus, centuries later, would make reference to this event, warning his disciples about the days of great tribulation that would come on earth. This 7-year period is discussed extensively in the book of Revelation and other passages of Scripture, pointing to a time of trouble like never before. The connection between Daniel and Revelation is undeniable. What Daniel saw in his visions is echoed in the revelations given to the Apostle John, who described a time when a world government would emerge, bringing a system of control and persecution against those who remained faithful to God. This government will be led by an arrogant ruler who will rise up against the Most High and demand worship. The prophecy of the 70 weeks shows us that God has established times and deadlines for all things. Every predicted event occurred with absolute precision, and the last remaining week is reserved for the days leading up to God's final intervention in history. If all parts of this prophecy have already been fulfilled exactly, this means that we are getting closer and closer to the final outcome. Last week's weather has not yet begun, but signs from the world indicate that it may be closer than we imagine. What Daniel received was not just a distant, symbolic vision. It was a wake-up call for all generations. He saw clearly that the history of the world is not adrift, but is heading towards an outcome determined by the Creator himself. Those who understand these words are not taken by surprise, for they know that everything is happening exactly as predicted thousands of years ago. Daniel's visions and prophecies extend far beyond his own time. What he received from God was not just a message for the people of Israel in exile, but a revelation about the destiny of all humanity. His words were recorded and sealed for an appointed time, and that time seems to be rapidly approaching. But what does all this mean for us today? How do these prophecies connect with the events we are witnessing in the world today? The 70-week prophecy showed us that God established specific periods in history. 69 of these weeks have already been completed exactly, and there's only one last week left to be lived. According to Daniel, this 7-year period will be marked by a world government that will emerge and a ruler who will directly challenge God's authority. This leader will be someone who will establish alliances, but who, halfway through this period, will break his own pacts and introduce a time of great tribulation. The book of Revelation, written centuries later, confirms this idea by describing a time of global domination where a system of control will be imposed on all humanity. John speaks of a leader who will demand worship and who will control the economy, preventing anyone from buying or selling without being subject to his rules. This figure, called the Beast, will be the height of rebellion against God, deceiving the nations and persecuting those who do not bow before him. If we go back to Daniel's day, we see that he was deeply distressed by these revelations. The biblical text says that he fell ill and spent days unable to fully understand what he saw. Even a man who walked with God and who was used to receiving dreams and visions was shaken when he realized what would happen in recent times. And this shows us that future events will not be ordinary. The world will go through a period of chaos, tribulation, and deception like never before. However, Daniel also saw the final solution. He saw a heavenly court where the Ancient of Days, God Almighty, sat to judge the nations. He saw one like the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven, receiving dominion and glory to reign forever. This same title, Son of Man, was used by Jesus to refer to himself, making it clear that he is the one who will fulfill the outcome of this prophecy. This means that despite all the prophesied chaos, the end will not be determined by human power or the forces of evil. It will be God who will bring the final judgment and establish his eternal kingdom. The dominion of human kingdoms will be replaced by a divine, just, and incorruptible government. The last chapters of the book of Daniel provide an instruction that echoes to this day. The angel told Daniel that the words of that prophecy would be sealed until the time of the end, when knowledge would multiply and the wise would understand. This means that the closer we get to the end of the story, the clearer these prophecies become. Today, we live in a world where technology advances by leaps and bounds, where nations are reorganizing, and where we see signs of political, economic, and moral instability. Knowledge, in fact, has multiplied like never before. But what few realize is that all of this was already described in the scriptures thousands of years ago. Daniel teaches us that the history of the world does not follow a random course. Each event is part of a plan established by God. And more than that, he shows us that there is hope. The destruction of the human kingdoms will give way to the only kingdom that will never be shaken. The Son of Man will come, no longer as a suffering servant, but as the King of Kings, who will judge the nations and establish eternal justice. The big question for each of us is, are we prepared? Daniel's prophecies were not written just to be studied, but to warn us and lead us to a decision. The end time is not a distant and abstract event. It is unfolding before our eyes. The question each person must ask themselves is not whether these prophecies are true, as history has already proven their accuracy. The real question is, what do we do with this knowledge? Daniel showed us that God is in control, but it is up to each person to decide which side they will be on when the final time comes. If you enjoy exploring biblical prophecies in a clear and deep way, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Leave a like to support this content and continue this journey by watching the next video, where we'll bring more surprising revelations. See you there.